until the Rosetta Stone was discovered and promptly acquired by Napoleon's campaign in Egypt.
What if the ancient city of Babylon didn't just hold ruins, but a gateway? It's not a metaphorical one, a literal stargate.
Each of these artifacts is a piece of the Iranian historical puzzle.
And here's where it gets wild. A 3,000-year-old clay tablet may have just confirmed it. Within weeks of the discovery, military forces locked the site down.
They knew what the text in the Greek said. This would perhaps provide the key to understanding what the hieroglyphic.
No explanations, no press access, just silence. Was it just another archaeological find? Or did they uncover something we were never meant to see? Let's start at the beginning, because everything changes with the discovery of one ancient map. 10th Ark map discovered. All right, let's kick this off with a question that has haunted humanity for centuries. What if the story of Noah's Ark was never just a story? Now, before you roll your eyes, thinking this is another ancient legend rehashed for the 1000th time, hold on, because what researchers just uncovered might change everything we thought we knew about the past, and possibly the future. So here's the scoop. Archaeologists have been quietly studying a 3,000-year-old clay tablet. Yep, a legit Babylonian artifact called the Imago Mundi. At first glance, it just looks like a circular slab covered in strange symbols. But this isn't just any artifact. This thing is believed to be the oldest map of the world ever discovered, and what it contains is jaw-dropping. Discovered way back in 1882 near ancient Babylon, modern-day Iraq, it's been tucked away in the British Museum all this time. But only recently have experts begun to decode the true significance of its markings. And let me tell you, this isn't your average history class moment. Engraved in cuneiform script, the tablet tells the tale of King Utnapishtim, a man who built a massive ark to survive a flood sent by the gods. Sound familiar? That's because his story mirrors the biblical account of Noah almost word for word. A divine warning, a gigantic boat, the survival of humanity. Coincidence? I don't think so. But here's where it gets wild. The tablet doesn't just tell the story. It gives directions, actual coordinates, written in ancient travel instructions. It says to journey 7 leagues, to reach something as thick as a parsiktu vessel, a reference to a boat. Now, in Babylonian terms, a parsiktu was a type of large boat. So, we're not talking about metaphors here. We're talking about literal, measurable instructions. And where do those instructions point to? A region the tablet calls Urartu. Today, that's eastern Turkey, right around the area of Mount Ararat. Sound familiar again? That's because the Bible says Noah's Ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. And here's the kicker. Researchers found that the dimensions described, 515 feet long, 86 feet wide, and 52 feet high, match the measurements of a mysterious boat-shaped formation found in that very region. Let that sink in. A Babylonian tablet, written over 3,000 years ago, may have just confirmed the possible location of Noah's Ark, and it's eerily consistent with both ancient myth and modern satellite imaging. The Imago Mundi doesn't just map the known world, it could be mapping a hidden truth. And you'd think that alone would be enough to blow people's minds. But trust me, what's next is even more insane. 9. Oldest Hebrew curse. If you thought the Babylonian tablet was wild, just wait till you hear what an American archaeologist uncovered on Mount Ebal, a place the Bible calls the Mountain of Curses. So picture this. You're combing through discarded excavation debris from a decades-old dig. Nothing special, right? But then, Dr. Scott Stripling, yep, from Texas, decides to re-examine this rubble using a technique called wet sifting. And what he pulled out of the dirt? A tiny, folded piece of lead, no bigger than a postage stamp. Looks like trash to most people, but inside, a message, written in an ancient script older than anything we've ever seen in Israel. This little object turned out to be a Hebrew curse tablet dating back to 1200 BCE, around the time the Israelites supposedly entered the Promised Land. And here's the kicker. When they scanned it using advanced imaging, they found 40 Hebrew letters, not just random letters, actual words, including the name of God. Yeah, you heard that right. This is the earliest known mention of YHWH, the sacred name of the God of Israel. It predates the Dead Sea Scrolls by centuries. It even predates the traditionally accepted timeline for when Hebrew writing supposedly emerged. This means, if this tablet is real, it rewrites everything we thought we knew about the early Israelites. No more oral tradition first, writing later theories. They were writing things down from the very beginning. Now, what was on this tablet? A curse, written in a literary style known as chiastic structure. That's when ideas are repeated in reverse order, kind of like a poetic mirror. It's a style you find in many biblical texts. That suggests this wasn't just a quick scribble. It was carefully composed, legally binding, and deeply symbolic. It warned of divine judgment. It carried weight. But here's where it gets really interesting and controversial. Some scholars immediately tried to discredit the find. In late 2023, critics claimed it might just be an old fishing weight, and that the markings were nothing more than natural corrosion. Sounds convenient, doesn't it? But Dr. Stripling and his team fired back with some serious science. Epigraphic analysis, lead isotope testing, and expert linguistic breakdowns all point to this being a legitimate, intentional inscription. So why are people so eager to shut this down? If this tiny tablet is real, it proves that the early Israelites were literate, organized, and had a written relationship with their deity far earlier than mainstream scholars are comfortable admitting. And it raises a bigger, more chilling question. What else have we missed or ignored because it didn't fit the narrative? First, the Imago Mundi points us to the Ark. Now, this cursed tablet brings ancient legal codes and early divine names to the surface. Two separate cultures, two very different artifacts, but both point to one undeniable truth. Ancient civilizations knew way more than we give them credit for. And if that's true, what secrets might still be buried beneath the surface, hidden in plain sight, or worse, intentionally covered up? So far, we've uncovered a divine name, buried in a curse, and a timeline that shatters traditional biblical scholarship. But now, we're heading back, way back, to Babylon. Long before the Greeks even dreamed of geometry, the Babylonians were doing math, which baffles scientists today. And the key to this mystery? A 3,700-year-old clay tablet with numbers that don't just calculate, they redefine history. 8. Babylonian math breakthrough. At first glance, it's just a small rectangular chunk of clay. But this unassuming artifact, known as Plimpton 322, isn't just a relic. It's a Rosetta Stone of ancient mathematics, a tool so advanced it suggests the Babylonians were solving problems modern students struggle with. 3,700 years ago, discovered in southern Iraq in the early 1900s by Edgar Banks, yes, the real-life inspiration for Indiana Jones, Plimpton 322 hails from the Sumerian city of Lhasa and is dated between 1822 and 1762 BCE. For decades, its purpose remained a mystery. Just rows of cuneiform numbers arranged neatly across 4 columns. But then researchers from the University of New South Wales took a closer look and cracked the code. What they found was nothing short of revolutionary. This wasn't just a list, it was a trigonometric table, the oldest and most accurate ever discovered. Forget Hipparchus and Pythagoras. The Babylonians beat them to it by over 1,000 years. The tablet uses base 60 mathematics and features Pythagorean triples, sets of numbers that solve the Pythagorean theorem. In simpler terms, they were calculating right-angled triangles before the Greeks even knew what a triangle was. But here's the twist. While Greek trigonometry relies on angles and circles, Babylonian math focused on ratios, a completely different approach and arguably more precise. This opens up a whole new window into how ancient civilizations understood space, structure, and even the stars. And this wasn't just theory. The tablet likely served as a tool for architects, surveyors, and engineers, used to build everything from palaces and temples to irrigation canals. Another tablet, known as C427, shows that Babylonians were using geometry to draw property lines, indicating a complex understanding of land division and legal boundaries. It's hard not to see the parallels with modern tech: blueprints, GPS coordinates, trigonometry, and they had all this in 1800 BCE. So now, the question becomes, if the Babylonians had this level of mathematical precision nearly 4,000 years ago, what else were they capable of? What secrets might still be encoded in their tablets, maybe even hidden in plain sight? Well, if you're looking for military campaigns, biblical mysteries, and historical contradictions, buckle up, because our next artifact doesn't just whisper secrets from the past, it shouts them across empires. 7. The Taylor Prism. Now we journey to Nineveh, the ancient capital of the Assyrian Empire, where a six-sided clay prism has managed to spark debates that span both theological and historical worlds. This is the Taylor Prism, dated to around 691 BCE. It holds the personal annals of King Sennacherib, one of the most ruthless and powerful rulers of the Neo-Assyrian period. His story is one of conquest, rebellion, and, most curiously, a moment of divine restraint. Discovered in 1830 by Colonel Robert Taylor and later housed in the British Museum, this artifact is one of 3 identical prisms, with twins residing in Chicago and Jerusalem. Each prism details Sennacherib's military campaigns, including a chillingly detailed account of his siege of Jerusalem in 701 BCE. And here's where things get spooky. In the prism, Sennacherib brags about locking King Hezekiah of Judah inside Jerusalem like a bird in a cage. He boasts of destroying 46 fortified cities, deporting over 200,000 people, and reshaping the region's political landscape. But here's the twist. He never claims to have taken Jerusalem. In the Bible, specifically 2 Kings 18-19 and Isaiah 36-37, we're told that divine intervention, an angel of the Lord, struck down 185,000 Assyrian soldiers, forcing Sennacherib to retreat. The Taylor Prism doesn't confirm that part, of course, but it also doesn't contradict it outright. It carefully omits a victory in Jerusalem, which has led many scholars to believe something extraordinary happened, something Sennacherib couldn't explain, or perhaps didn't want to admit. Was it divine protection, military miscalculation, or something more mysterious, something that challenged the very narrative Sennacherib was trying to preserve? Either way, this prism serves as a bridge between 2 ancient civilizations, Assyria and Israel. It forces us to compare narratives from different lenses: religious, political, and archaeological. And beyond its historical weight, the Taylor Prism was also instrumental in deciphering cuneiform, allowing us to unlock thousands of other ancient texts. It didn't just record history, it gave us the tools to understand it. 3 artifacts in, and already we've had curses, trigonometry, and military propaganda. But things are about to take an even darker turn. Just as the Taylor Prism helped bridge the gap between biblical texts and ancient empires, our next discovery continues the theme of rediscovering lost connections. But this time, the spotlight shifts to Iran, where an ancient voice, long silenced, is finally being heard once again. 6 Persian tablets returned. In a historic and deeply symbolic moment, Iran recently unveiled a trove of ancient clay tablets that had been held in the United States for nearly a century. These seemingly humble tablets are anything but ordinary. They date back to the mighty Achaemenid Empire, a global superpower from the 6th to 4th centuries BC. And what's written on them? Priceless clues about how one of history's greatest empires functioned behind the scenes. Originally discovered in the 1930s by German archaeologist Ernst Emil Herzfeld during his excavations at Persepolis, the tablets were meant to be loaned temporarily to the University of Chicago for scholarly study. But temporary turned into decades, tangled in lawsuits, and geopolitical tensions that kept the artifacts far from home. In total, nearly 30,000 tablets or fragments made their way to the US. They're etched in Elamite cuneiform, documenting everything from labor distribution and religious practices to administrative transactions. Think of them as ancient spreadsheets, chronicling the day-to-day logistics of an empire that once ruled over nearly half of the known world. But reclaiming them wasn't easy. After some batches were returned between 1948 and 2004, the rest were caught in a legal tug-of-war. In an unexpected twist, survivors of a terrorist attack in Israel sued to seize the tablets as compensation, dragging these ancient records into a very modern legal battlefield. The US Supreme Court finally ruled against the seizure in 2018, paving the way for their return. Still, sanctions reimposed on Iran that same year threw another wrench into the plans. Despite the complications, Iran persisted. In September 2023, 3,506 tablets were returned. A year later, in September 2024, another 1,100 followed. And each artifact that crossed the border wasn't just a relic, it was a symbol of cultural resilience and identity. Scholars are particularly excited because the tablets reveal aspects of the reign of Darius I, the king who famously organized the empire into satrapies and launched the construction of royal roads. These records describe the allocation of food rations, temple rituals, and bureaucratic decisions. They paint a picture of an empire run with precision, deeply rooted in ritual and record-keeping. Perhaps most remarkable is how this episode reminds us that history isn't just found, it's fought for. These tablets didn't just survive thousands of years underground, they survived the modern struggle for ownership and memory. And speaking of ancient mysteries that have baffled scholars for decades, what if the next artifact wasn't just hard to understand, but impossible to decipher? 5. Hieroglyphs, God's secret script. Hieroglyphs, those intricate, beautiful symbols carved onto stone and painted onto ancient walls, were never just pictures. That's the first thing many people get wrong. Despite their seemingly artistic appearance, hieroglyphs were a phonetic writing system from the very beginning. That's right, they didn't evolve from crude drawings or pictograms over time like many assume. Instead, they emerged suddenly at the end of the 4th millennium BCE as fully formed phonetic symbols. Early examples were etched onto pottery jars and ivory plaques placed inside tombs, likely to identify the deceased. And here's the eerie part. Some of these symbols represented not the objects they resembled, but words that sounded like them. Imagine drawing an eye, but what you mean is the word "I." It's a system packed with layers of meaning from the start, hinting at a complex language far beyond what you'd expect for such an ancient time. What's more, evidence shows that Egyptian writing didn't descend from Sumerian cuneiform. Despite their geographical proximity, these systems developed independently. And while Sumerian tablets evolved from pictograms, Egypt skipped that stage entirely. No transitional period, no learning curve, just a fully functioning script from the outset. Even more mysterious are the so-called jar marks, found on the bottoms of clay vessels from the same era. They look like primitive symbols, but they weren't precursors to hieroglyphs. Instead, they evolved alongside them, suggesting that multiple writing systems were born in Egypt around the same time. Coincidence? Or was something or someone teaching them? As time passed, hieroglyphs became more elaborate, recording names, titles, offerings, and eventually full sentences by the end of Egypt's second dynasty. And intriguingly, their evolution mirrored changes in Egyptian art. Since the same artisans often painted both murals and scripts, the style of one influenced the other. Yet hieroglyphs often held on to outdated forms long after art had moved on, like how faces in profile became standard in art, but the front-facing face persisted in writing. Even long obsolete tools, like ancient clubs, remained immortalized in scripts. Why? Some believe these preserved symbols carry spiritual weight. Others wonder if the ancient Egyptians were deliberately maintaining a sacred tradition, bound by rules lost to time. But for centuries, these beautiful inscriptions were unreadable. Entire temples filled with knowledge, locked behind a code no one could crack. That is, until one remarkable discovery changed everything. 4. The Rosetta Stone. It was buried in a wall, just part of the structure. In July 1799, during Napoleon's Egyptian campaign, a group of French soldiers was fortifying Fort Julian near the Nile Delta town of Rosetta, modern-day Rashid, when they stumbled upon a large black stone. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary piece of building material, but as they brushed away the dust, they saw the inscriptions, 3 distinct bands of text carved into its surface. And just like that, the key to ancient Egypt was found. The Rosetta Stone, as it came to be known, is a slab of granodiorite etched with a decree issued in 196 BC during the reign of King Ptolemy V. What makes it extraordinary? The decree was written in 3 scripts: Egyptian hieroglyphs at the top, Demotic script in the middle, and ancient Greek at the bottom. At the time, nobody could read hieroglyphs, but Greek, that was still a living language. So the stone offered a direct comparison, a linguistic Rosetta key, if you will, between the known and the unknown. The discovery was immediately reported to the Institut d'Egypte, and soon word spread through the scholarly world. But cracking the code wasn't easy. Early researchers assumed it would be a simple translation, but hieroglyphs weren't just an alphabet. They were a mix of phonetic sounds, symbolic meanings, and sacred representations. Enter Thomas Young, an English polymath, who first identified that the cartouches, those ovals enclosing names, contained royal names like Ptolemy. His breakthrough, recognizing that some hieroglyphs stood for sounds, not just objects, but it was French scholar Jean-François Champollion who took Young's insights and finally cracked the system. In 1822, after years of meticulous study, he proved that hieroglyphs combined phonetics with ideograms. A single symbol could be a sound, a word, or an idea. It was a code, but not a simple one. Champollion's work didn't just decode a language, it opened the door to understanding ancient Egypt's history, religion, and culture in their own words for the first time in millennia. But the story of the Rosetta Stone doesn't end there. After the British defeated the French in Egypt, they seized the artifact and transported it to London, where it's still on display in the British Museum today. Its status as a cultural icon is controversial, with ongoing debates about whether it should be returned to Egypt. Still, the stone's legacy is unquestionable. Without it, hieroglyphs might still be a mystery, and the voices of ancient pharaohs would remain forever silent. And yet, what other scripts are still waiting to be understood? If the Rosetta Stone was the key to one civilization, could there be other keys still buried out there? While the Rosetta Stone opened the gates to understanding Egypt's ancient language, a similar breakthrough was happening miles away in the rugged cliffs of Iran. There, carved into sheer rock, high above an ancient road, lay a forgotten message from a Persian king, one that would do for cuneiform what the Rosetta Stone did for hieroglyphs. 3. Behistun, Persia's codebreaker. Imagine standing at the foot of a massive limestone cliff, squinting to make out strange markings etched 100 meters above you. These aren't just random symbols. They're a message from over 2,500 years ago. Welcome to the Behistun inscription, ancient Persia's most powerful written declaration, and a key that unlocked the mysteries of cuneiform. Commissioned by Darius I the Great, sometime between 522 and 486 BCE, this monumental inscription isn't just an ego boost for a powerful king. It's a multilingual puzzle, carved in Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, that turned out to be a Rosetta Stone of the East. The comparison isn't just poetic, it's literal. Just as scholars used the Greek on the Rosetta Stone, To crack Egyptian hieroglyphs, they used the known Old Persian from Behistun to finally decipher the once indecipherable cuneiform script. Let's talk visuals. At the center of the inscription is Darius himself, life-sized, bow in hand, standing over a defeated rebel named Gaumata. Behind him, 10 bound captives represent conquered peoples. And above them all, the winged figure of Faravahar, a Zoroastrian symbol representing divine blessing. Its history, art, propaganda, and religion, all in one image. But the real genius of Behistun lies in its text. Darius doesn't just brag about his victories, he documents them like a war diary. 19 revolts, multiple kingdoms, 1 year. It's as if he wanted to make sure no one ever forgot how hard he fought to rule and exactly whom he defeated to get there. Now here's the wild part. This whole thing could have remained lost to history if not for 19th century adventurers. British Army officer Henry Rawlinson was one of the first to risk life and limb climbing that cliff to copy the inscriptions. Piece by piece, linguists like Rawlinson, Christian Lasson, and Eugène Burnouf compared scripts, cracked grammatical patterns, and slowly breathed life back into ancient Mesopotamian languages. Thanks to their work, the Behistun inscription did more than just preserve Darius's legacy. It resurrected voices that had been silent for millennia. Civilizations like the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians could finally speak again, and the world listened. And just when you think ancient stones couldn't get more mysterious, along comes an artifact from Egypt, even older, darker, and wrapped in symbolism. 2. The Narmer Palette. Before pyramids, before pharaohs as we know them, before the grandeur of ancient Egypt had even taken shape, there was Narmer. The Narmer Palette, a 5,000-year-old ceremonial stone, holds the very first record of a moment that changed Egypt forever, the unification of its 2 kingdoms. Discovered in 1897 at Hierakonpolis, one of Egypt's oldest cities, this artifact looks simple at first, just a flat, shield-shaped piece of siltstone. But what's etched on it tells a story of conquest, power, and divine rule. This isn't a tool or a trinket. This is political propaganda at its most primal. On one side, King Narmer is seen towering over an enemy, ready to strike, wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt. On the reverse, he's got on the red crown of Lower Egypt. Just like that, one man is shown ruling both regions, a symbolic act that marks the very beginning of the first dynasty. But the story doesn't stop with crowns and conquests. The Narmer Palette is drenched in symbolism. There's Horus, the falcon god of kingship, perched on papyrus plants, representing victory over Lower Egypt. There are intertwined mythic beasts with serpent necks, a visual metaphor for unity. And throughout the design, Narmer is always the largest figure. This wasn't just art, it was a declaration. The king is divine and he controls it all. What's even more fascinating is that this ceremonial object, though never meant for practical use, was carved using conventions that would define Egyptian art for centuries. The larger-than-life ruler, the side profile face, the orderly hierarchical scenes. It all starts here, on this one piece of carved stone. Today, the Narmer Palette sits in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, still mesmerizing scholars and visitors alike. For many, it's not just a stone, it's the birth certificate of ancient Egypt. And if this ceremonial object could speak, what other tales from the dawn of civilization might still be waiting to be unearthed? Just as the Narmer Palette captures the emergence of a unified Egypt, imagine if we stumbled upon ancient receipts, contracts, and letters that captured a lost chapter of biblical history, one we've only heard about through scripture. Well, that's exactly what happened with the discovery of the Al-Yahudu tablets, a set of cuneiform clay records that breathed life into the story of the Babylonian exile. 1. Babylon's lunar prophecies. While the Judeans recorded their exile on earth, the Babylonians were watching the heavens closely. From the ancient city of Sippar, 4 unearthed tablets dating back 4,000 years reveal something bone-chilling. Lunar eclipses weren't just natural events, they were divine warnings. These tablets, tucked away in the British Museum for decades, were recently deciphered by scholars Andrew George and Junko Taniguchi. What did they find? The oldest known system of eclipse omens. In Babylonian belief, a lunar eclipse could signal disaster, especially for rulers. If the moon turned blood red, it might mean the death of a king. If shadows passed across certain parts of the sky, entire regions like Elam or Akkad could fall. These weren't vague guesses. The tablets detailed timing, shadow patterns, and durations of eclipses, like a cosmic code. And here's the eerie part. They didn't just interpret the signs, they acted on them. If an eclipse pointed to royal death, a substitute king might be placed on the throne while rituals were performed to shift fate. Sometimes, these substitute kings were killed after the threat passed, just to be safe. The Babylonians believed the gods left messages in the sky, and it was their duty to read them. Their astrologers weren't just stargazers, they were elite advisors whose readings influenced war, law, and ritual. Sounds superstitious? Maybe, but think of how we still react to blood moons, eclipses, or planetary alignments today. Have we evolved past the fear that something bigger is out there, watching, warning? From exile in clay to omens in the stars, these ancient records make one thing clear. Our ancestors didn't just live history, they tried to predict it. If any of these discoveries blew your mind, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe if you're into ancient mysteries and forgotten history like I am. And yeah, ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Let me know in the comments which one of these blew you away the most. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Alright, until next time, stay curious.